to make sure it's feasible to produce. I like it so that I can take the photos and show people, try it on with customers, and make sure it's something that actually works. The
Mm,
other reason they do a lot of samples is to make sure essentially it's done right. They're kind of teaching themselves what it should look like. So you send a manufacturer more or less like what like a draft of a building would be, like kind of the floor plan.
Welcome everybody back with another episode of Hard Hat to CEO. This is Chris G here, and today I want to talk about the episode before we get started. Um, our guest Julia come to me, or we got together, and I was wondering what in the world are we going to talk about today, because Julia does something that we don't do in construction, but that's okay because what we're going to talk about is passion and taking what you're passionate about and making it into a business. We're also going to talk about vision because vision becomes very important to all of us in your current business or construction, or even, I talk about having other businesses bringing in that revenue, those other assets. So that's vision important. And I also like to talk about how we find and look for ways to um, find those things we want to improve on. I was always taught to look for a problem and then solve it. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how to take some things that are already existing and modify them to solve a different problem. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And who's going to do that for me? That's Julia DeNey. Julia's from New York. Well, I didn't ask. Is it New York City or New York State?
Yeah, New York City.
New York City. Actually, I'm in Missouri, so it's okay. You make fun of us rednecks too if you want.
No, I love it. My dad's from Missouri, so
Well, there we go. Good man. Good man. And all right. So, Julia, I want to let you introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'm Julia Denai. I worked in special education and then went on to become a founder in fashion design, which was my educational background to solve a problem, as you said, that I saw that needed to be solved, and I had the unique skill set to do it.
I was talking earlier thinking, well, I have Julia, and I've told you about some of that, but I also thought, if you get nothing else out of this, that you might know somebody, a child or even an adult, that will need Julia's product. And you can share that information with them as well. And we'll talk about that at the end because I think it's very important. But Julia, tell us what you do, and then we're going to get into some more basic entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah, so I have a clothing line that's made for autistic kids and adults and anyone with sensory needs that changes clothing in order to help them be regulated in the world and feel more comfortable and be able to be included. So the clothing has certain changes like magnets instead of zippers, hoods that help block sound in a hoodie, compression built in, fidgets built in, little tools that they always have on them to help them succeed in their days.
I was wondering when I was reading my notes from Edna Lynn, um, are these custom clothes? I know they're custom, but I mean, do you make them per person, or is it like the with the magnets? Is it mass produced and everybody buys it? I want one with magnets, and I buy that. Or do you do it by the
Yeah,
person?
I have to do it by larger manufacturing runs to make
Hmm.
all those adaptive changes essentially worth it. You can't buy just like 5 of the apparel magnets, you buy a bunch. So I do get them all mass manufactured. Then you go on our website and you could shop for what we have available.
Awesome. So let's talk about a little about passion. And you didn't always do this, right?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So what drove you to this decision to make apparel?
Yeah, I think I was always very conflicted. I was always very nerdy in school, and fashion seemed very artistic and very kind of separate from what I'd been focusing on. But when I realized kind of the technical side of fashion, I ended up really falling in love with it. And where I ended up with this business was really by chance. I very separately from fashion started volunteering at a local autism preschool and really just fell in love with the kids and staff I was working with. And they brought up clothing challenges to me. And I realized that I could use this passion for design and clothing that I always had, but always felt like, where's the purpose in that? Is it providing any good to kind of combine with this volunteer work I'd been doing in this community I fell in love with to solve a problem for them and use fashion in a very positive way?
in my corporate life, we call it R&D. What kind of research and development? What kind of you just didn't go out and start buying magnets and other clothing. What'd you do to test that type of stuff?
Yeah, so I started working in special education during the pandemic when I graduated. So I got to do a lot of hands-on research with autistic kids themselves in a classroom setting, which was awesome. I also worked really closely with occupational therapists, teachers, parents, and interviewed as many people as possible. I talked to a lot of autistic adults about their experiences and what they like and don't like to wear. So it was a lot of conversations, a lot of surveys sent out, and a lot of just listening to other people's stories and experiences and needs.
Speaking of stories, can you tell me one where it really helped change a person's life with your clothing?
Yeah. Yeah, I love these. I have a few customers that will reach out every now and again and really share a detailed story, which I love. And one that really stands out to me is a mom who reached out. I think it was a day after her hoodie arrived that she ordered from us, the hoodie that helped block sound, and said that her son was able to eat in the cafeteria with all his peers for the first time because the sound level in the cafeteria can be so high that he couldn't eat. So they would keep him in a separate room alone. And this time he was able to eat with all his friends because he was able to have the hoodie that helped block out the sound, which was really cool. And really just shows like the impact of the small day-to-day things that you don't really think about, especially when it comes to sensory. Like I would just eat in the cafeteria and not think about how loud it was. So that was really cool.
Yeah. So he was eating in isolation, not on purpose. I mean, well, it was on
Right.
purpose, I guess, but not as punishment. It was just so he
No,
could get
right.
through his day. And that is a great story. Um, so passion's important, but you had a vision too at some point, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Have you reached your vision or have you completed your vision or you're in process of?
I think definitely in process of. I think right now it's still small and I have a great bigger vision for the brand of just being able to incorporate it more into mainstream clothing, let them, be able to shop, say at the Gap, and their siblings can buy one thing, they can buy something that looks the same, but has the adaptions they need. So I think there's a greater vision out there, but I think this is definitely a lot further than I thought I would get back in 2018 as a student.
Sure. Do you have any help? I mean, I know you have manufacturers and stuff, but I mean, do you have any direct
Yeah.
help?
I occasionally take on college interns to help with some tasks, but overall, the whole company is still just me, which is a little crazy, but also great in a lot of ways because I really know what's happening in all facets.
You and I discussed earlier, and we'll bring it up now. You're taking something that already exists, clothing,
Yep.
and you're modifying it. And I guess my question is how modified is it? Are we talking, I mean, obviously we have most people have two arms, two legs, those clothing, that's normal stuff. But you're modified in textures, obviously magnets, talking about hoodies that block sound. Are you going way out of the way, or is it just simple modifications?
There are a lot of changes that are simple modifications, like changing what type of stitching you use on the seams so that there's nothing bothersome inside the clothing, or making sure there's no tags you print it on. Those I consider pretty small modifications. And then
Mhm.
some of the things like the magnets, or especially like the sound reducing in the hood and an eye mask that can pull down, certain of those more advanced features are pretty modified and take a lot of work to teach manufacturers how to do and find the right materials because they're not typical in fashion. So some of those are a little more severe and take like a lot more communication and honestly vision from the way beginning of how to execute it.
I got two. I'm gonna write my note down before I forget. You're talking about the manufacturers. Was it hard to find one that would help you in your mission?
I think the hardest part was finding one that I could trust to help me in the mission. I think
Yeah.
it's really quick for manufacturers to say, like, yes, we'll work with you, and they like want new clients and they want more business, but not all of them are actually capable of executing it. And that's something I had to learn, was that people will say yes to get a customer, but that doesn't mean they're the best fit for you. And so I think it was harder to find someone that really could execute the work and be really willing to work with me, especially on those modifications and really trying it a bunch of different ways and really being a partner in it rather than just someone who wanted to like churn out another customer.
How many people you think you went through to get that right one?
I think I talked to 3 people I didn't love, and then I ended up connecting with a team to help me connect to the right manufacturer. I think I realized that it was gonna be hard to do it alone, and I needed some outside opinions and expertise and people who worked with factories all the time for different reasons. And so really by my 4th one, we found someone, but it did take I had to get some outside consulting to get there.
There is nothing wrong with that. I talk about that all the time. You need somebody not necessarily smarter than you, but have more experience. How's that sound?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. No, it's so true.
now, not getting into the politics of things, is your manufacturer outside of the United States or inside?
Yeah, they are outside of the United States.
Okay, that's curious. Um, I know with all the tariffs going on right now and the discussions and how that's, we're not even talk about that. I'm just that'll affect things though, obviously, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a big concern because I think I'm always thinking about my customer first. And for them, a lot of them will have a lot of extra expenses. So you think about the therapies they have to go to and typically pay for out of pocket, all the different sensory tools and educational tools and supports they have to pay for. So for me, cost was always the biggest thing I wanted to keep in mind for them and making it as affordable as possible. And so potential tariffs adding to that is always stressful for me because I know it affects my customers so greatly. And it is one of the reasons I had to move the manufacturing to abroad. Like even talking to US manufacturers, they just couldn't do these kind of modifications in clothing for a reasonable price. I'd have to sell the hoodies for 4 times the cost. And the manufacturers themselves told me, like, don't do it in the US because it's not going to work for your customers. So that's been a challenging thing to balance is knowing that there isn't really an alternative, but knowing this customer base doesn't need any extra expenses. They already have so many in their lives. So that's definitely a hard thing I try to balance as a business. And I just try to be really mindful in all my decisions.
Kudos to those guys that told you where to go and not try to take advantage of you.
Yeah,
Um, Neiman Marcus, I think, started that a long time ago. And you know the story Neiman Marcus, but I'll give you a quick. So basically, at Christmas time, they had a catalog, and people call in. I assume they call in, and the solution was they wanted to provide such good customer service that if they didn't have it, they tell you where to go and where to get it at. And that was like,
that's
we're
awesome.
not, you're not here for us. We're here for you, and we'd love to
Right.
serve you. But if we can't take care of you, I'm going to send you someplace that does. My second question, as I wrote down here, how do you determine or decide what solution you're going to try to solve, and how's that affected by the price, or not by price? How's it affected by the profit? Obviously, you got to make a profit as a company,
Right.
but then you got to decide too what you're going to solve and how it's going to market that. How do you go about that?
Yeah, so I think for in terms of what problem I'm going to solve for each design and each new clothing item I make, that really goes to the customers and the community. I think I spend most of my time, especially in the way beginning of starting the company, I spend most of the time not building the company or doing marketing, but just talking to people in the community and make sure they're kind of the center of what you're doing, who you're solving a problem for is who you're talking to. So I think that was the biggest thing for me. And then in terms of pricing and profit, it's been kind of that challenge of figuring out like what people are able to spend or willing to spend. That I kind of learned are two different things. I think even if you see the value in something and you say, oh, I'd pay like $200, like it's worth that in value. If people don't have that money to spend it, they're not going to
It
buy it.
doesn't
And
doesn't matter what the value is. If they don't have
right.
it, they don't have it.
Right. So I'll have people say, like, oh, the value of your sound reducing hoodie, like it's the only one on the market. Nothing else exists. It's solving this great problem. You should sell it for so much more than you do. And that's just the value. And that's where you got to talk to your customer like, yeah, but then most people who need it can't afford it. So that's definitely the hard balance I've been trying to keep. And I think it's something I'm still honestly working on is figuring out how much I can essentially charge and people can afford to keep my business going. I think I'm hitting a point where I maybe started selling them for too little, and that's making it hard to grow as a business and see that profitability, which is definitely a challenge and something I'm learning through. But it is so hard when you're being so mindful of your customer and like what their life circumstances are and what they can afford. So that's a hard balance that I think I'm still learning my way through, but it's kind of just a constant communication with my customers of checking in and seeing, hey, okay, you bought it. Say it's $50. Can you buy it at 55? Is that still feeling reasonable to you? Would you buy it at 57? And just finding where that kind of middle ground is and where kind of their cap is. And then I have to work on making it cheaper to make on the back end once we kind of hit the customer's peak of what they can afford.
That's what I was going to ask. Does the manufacturer help you in ideas on ways to cut cost?
Yeah, they definitely help provide options like this zipper costs this much, this zipper costs this much, and I can choose and go
Hmm.
from there. And I think also from there with manufacturing, especially apparel, the biggest thing is that the amount you order changes the cost a lot. So as we grow and we're able to order more, the better it'll ultimately be for me for cost on the back
Right.
end, which is another reason I kept pricing lower in the beginning with lower margins and not seeing profitability, is knowing that as it grows and it is solving a need, I'll be seeing bigger margins. So I don't need to charge my customers so much more at first, knowing hopefully kind of my bigger margins and profitability will
Right.
come.
The economies of scale will work itself out. Type.
Exactly.
Cool. Do you have a for your future growth? Do you have a list of problems that you want to tackle? And I say problems, um, maybe solutions would be a better way to say it. There's something you want to solve for future product ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's so interesting about sensory in general is like we're all aware of all of our senses, but it's really interesting to see all the different ways clothing can play a role in those, and all the different ways that people who process that sensory input in their senses differently are affected. So some kids, don't feel temperature and don't want to wear a coat in the winter because they don't feel cold and don't feel that kind of sensory input that we feel. So there's so many different sides of it, that there's so many different things that I would love to design into and be a part of. I have customers reach out all the time with, oh, my child chews on their shirt. Do you have a solution for that? And when I don't have a product that solves that, it just gets added to the list of this is clearly a problem. And I just kind of keep a tally. Like if I have 10 customers that reach out wanting a certain product, I know that that's a product that needs to be bumped up to the top of the list of a problem and a solution I need to create. So that's really cool. And it's awesome that this community is so willing to do that and say, like, hey, this is a problem. I see you don't have it. I'd love to see this one day, or this type of problem. So that communication has been really great. And I think I have honestly a list of over 10 different like problems or solutions that I want to create for people. And within that, what's cool with fashion is that can come in so many different forms. So, like our hoodie that blocks sound, that hoodie can look very different. That can be turned into a vest. Those can be different colors and patterns. So, ultimately, that'll create a lot of different garments. But the list of like baseline solutions and problems that I want to solve definitely grows each time a customer reaches out, which is from my design background, very exciting.
I've got a lot of different questions now. Let's go. I want to go to this one here. On the research, and I'm not saying research, is there a way to identify? All right, so you've got a class of students. Let me give you my thoughts here. You have a class of students. Some of them need the hoodies.
Yep.
Is there a way to go out and say, well, is there a way to a survey or even ask AI, I guess? Is there a way to figure out how many people in the world, for that matter, need the hoodies versus the visors coming down?
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I actually have not asked AI. I'd love to see what it says. I know that 1 in 6 kids they assess now has sensory processing disorder. So it take in sensory input in a different way, but that can affect so many different senses that that doesn't necessarily mean they all need compression or they all need hoodies. What's really interesting about sensory is it's so personalized and it almost can change from environment to environment or day to day, just like what's feeling the most sensitive. So people will fluctuate between being what they call sensory seekers, where you are seeking extra sensory input, such as wanting really tight hugs, or they're the ones who probably don't feel the cold in the winter because they're just like under sensitive. So to feel baseline regulated, you need more input. And then there's sensory avoiders where like even a little noise can feel painful. Like they're very hyper aware of those things. So in that regard, people can fluctuate through within that. They'll identify as like sensory seekers for sound, but sensory avoidant for textures, like feeling the tags in the shirt. So everyone's profile is so different that I am curious if AI would be able to give an estimate or not, or if it is so personalized that it's almost hard to judge who would need it.
So in the construction world, we advertise or we do lots of talking and handshaking and oh, I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? But negotiations and so forth. We're finding deals all the time so we can build and
Yep.
keep our guys going. Um, in your case, who identifies the need? And I don't mean what I mean by that is I've been out of school for a long time, but when I was in school, you kind of went to school and people identified that there's something you need help with, and they'd put
Right.
you in a different class or a different. You go to a special group.
Yep.
Do they still do that now, or are they identifying it before they even get to school with the doctors?
Yeah, so that still definitely happens sometimes in schools. They start noticing things, but it's definitely gotten a lot better. So a lot of people will get diagnosed by 3. Some people will get diagnosed or sent to early intervention or given some sort of support by 18 months is kind of the youngest they say now that they can do. So that 18 months to about 3 or 4 years old has gotten a lot stronger, which is awesome because they can be set up with supports heading into school. But they're definitely kids that don't get identified, or if it's something that runs in your family, you might not like a lot of things like autism, ADHD, like are genetic. So if you're a parent who wasn't identified and went through life without being diagnosed, and your kid acts exactly how you did as a kid, like you might not think anything of it when they're 3. You're like, well, that's what me and my sister and everyone was like. So that usually sometimes gets pushed later to teachers who will identify it, or if there's a struggle in a school, or more typically identified in the educational setting. So both happen, but there's definitely been a big increase in that earlier intervention and earlier diagnoses.
Okay. Well, there's a method to my madness on my questions. So my next
Yeah.
question would be, and this is for everybody in general, how do you get your name or your product out to these type of people? And I don't mean that negatively. It's just
Yeah.
I would assume not everybody just like looks up, I need a hoodie for my child who has
Right.
autism, and they might, I don't know, but how do you get? Does it? You have doctors that recommend your stuff? Do you have schools? How do you marketing your items?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting because I think for niche communities, it is different than a product that really anyone can use. And so you don't need kind of the everywhere marketing. You need to target your niche group. So that's been really interesting to figure out. And one of the best ways I've found to do that is actually on social media. What I've found is that a lot of these parents, if in their communities, they feel very isolated, like no one else on their block has a kid that's autistic and no one else gets it, they'll turn to online communities. So there's actually a lot of like autism mom influencers or bloggers that people connect with, Facebook groups that people go to for advice and just celebrate things. They'll say like, "Oh, it's my son's birthday. Like, please wish him a happy birthday." Like, no one in his class came to the party. Like, very sad stories like that. But they
Yeah.
just sometimes feel isolated in their local communities, so they turn to these online hubs, which has been really cool to be able to tap into and see and help build community. And so, yeah, online has been amazing. And what's great about that is it takes a lot of time, but it is a fairly free way to do it. You can do paid ads also, but if you put in the time, that organic social reach and that personal outreach does turn into great word of mouth and can be really great. And from there, yeah, I definitely work with a lot of schools, a lot of therapists, some like pediatric doctors, people who may be diagnosing. So anyone that kind of has touch points with a lot of parents has also been great because they have it as a back pocket resource if parents come to them too and say, hey, we're struggling with clothes or we're struggling with sound, but he doesn't like headphones. These therapists are then equipped to say, like, hey, here's an alternative to try, which helps them, helps me, and helps the parents. So that's been really great too. Is just using that kind of network, tapping into who wants to almost like wants to do free marketing for you because it helps them too to have a knowledge base of resources.
I want to not quite shift gears quite yet, but I'm getting ready to. Um, Fulfillment. How do you fulfill? Is it only you by yourself? Is it like
Yeah.
ship direct, or you got your garage is stuffed full of these things and you're sending them out as time goes, or how's that work?
Yeah, definitely my garage is stuffed full. I live in New York City, but my parents are actually in Connecticut, so a suburb of the city. And they have very graciously let me take over their entire basement and garage with shelving and turn it into a complete warehouse, which has been great because it's saved a lot of cost. And they're slowly being trained to help me pack orders so I don't have to come out multiple times a week, which has been a really fun family activity of getting them involved in something they never thought they'd be involved in. But it's been great to kind of be able to do it that way since my apartment never could and a lot of founders don't have that space. But I really try to find everything, especially in the early stages, that I can cut in terms of costs. And yeah, fulfilling it myself and storing it in the house was just one of those DIY solutions.
I love success stories. So my question, not for dollar, what's your biggest order ever been? Meaning that, do you have a group that buys a bunch of hoodies? I'm just using the hoodies because I like the idea. A bunch of
Yeah.
hoodies for a group of kids, or is it like a lot of individual? I assume a lot of individual sales. Like you're on Amazon, you're buying a shirt or a hoodie in this case. You get one.
Yep.
You got a lot of singles, I assume. Do you ever had any big orders?
We have had, yeah, it's a lot of singles. Even from schools, they'll individually buy it for a lot of students. We did have one school that bought it for, I think it was 5 students, like all in one order, which is pretty awesome. But we will have some pretty big individual orders that are always really exciting. Like I've had someone buy like 3 or 4 full outfits worth, and I had to go buy like bigger mailers. I like wasn't prepped to mail such a big order, but that was really exciting. And we've have had bigger orders from abroad because it's easier for people to kind of split up the shipping rather than all of them having to pay shipping from New York to London or Germany. They'll do like a group order, so that's really cool too.
How far have you shipped your stuff?
I just looked it up at the end of the year to do a year recap, and we've shipped it to 31 countries. And I think Australia was probably the furthest they traveled.
Now, now I'm going to shift gears. You know, what you're doing, I think, and what I'm doing as a podcast. I live in a rural city. I
Yeah.
actually live out in the country. I had no desire to move to the city. Had no desire to,
Mhm.
um, but I couldn't do what I do now without the internet.
Right.
Could you do what you're doing now without the internet? Or at least I
Definitely
get
not. Yeah.
okay. You probably could do it
Yeah.
to a smaller
A small extent.
degree.
Yeah.
But what it's allowing us to do is, ship to Australia, get your
Right.
ideas out. I say that for everybody. It's purpose, really. That with the internet, you're not as tied as you used to be.
Yep.
Um, a long time ago, I've been doing some of this stuff since 2011, more of the online stuff. Actually, when it started out, actually, I was starting out some of that stuff when it just began, and
Cool.
it became very clear to me that I live in a town of 800, and the biggest city is about 30 miles away, and that type of stuff is hard to do. It's just too time consuming and costly.
Yeah. Right.
And so my point being is, wherever you're at, as long as you have the internet and a laptop,
Yeah.
basically, you can
Yeah.
do whatever your passion or vision you want to do. So don't let that stop you. If you're a contractor out there and wanting to create another business, find a solution, even something that has to do with the uh, construction business. Have a lot of people have come on as guests,
Yeah.
Julia, and they've just taken the construction business and then taken a part of it and changed it a little bit with using the internet. For
That's
example,
awesome.
one guy was
Yeah.
using software and trackers to keep track of rental equipment. So
Oh, that's
those are
awesome.
problems. We're talking about problems we're solving
Yeah.
and just making it better. If you had to give somebody a recommendation or something or some insight, how would they find what should they look for as something to solve that maybe can? generate some income.
Yeah, I definitely say I think it's super easy to, in your day-to-day life, kind of learn to adapt yourself around a lot of problems without thinking about it. So I think what I found, like, this was something that, people were coming up with DIY solutions for their kids, but you kind of step back and you say, why do we have to do that? So I think it was the best place to start, especially for something like construction, is just being very mindful through your day and notice little things you may not have noticed. I know, like, my brother-in-law, say, works in construction, and they were working on their house, and he was like dropping nails everywhere. And I realized online someone had built like a magnet tool belt or something where they could all stick to you and not be all over at the end of the day. You have to sweep them up. And so I got it for him for Christmas. He was like, this is amazing. But it never occurred to him that it was a problem, that he was like, had
Yeah.
screws everywhere and he was dropping them. So I think that's something where in your day to day, if you just notice, you're like, wow, it's pretty annoying that I have to be down here picking up screws, or someone accidentally steps on them, or the dog ate one, then you're like, hey, I could create a very simple solution for that, which is like having a magnet on your belt. So I think that's honestly the best place to start, because if it's a problem you're experiencing, a lot of other people are experiencing. I think it's like what teachers used to say in school: raise your hand if you have the question, because I guarantee someone else in the class has that question. I find that day to day life problems are so like that. And once there's a solution, someone's like, wow, why did I never think of that? Like, those are always the best innovations, when you're like, hey, I could have come up with that, but you just don't think about what was bothering you. You
Yeah.
just learn to deal with it in your day. So I think, yeah, that first step of just being really mindful through your day and noticing where you're kind of stumbling or you're wasting time is the perfect place to start.
Awesome. Before I wrap up, I have another thought, and I want to talk about growth a little bit. And to be honest with you, when we first talk about hoodies and stuff like that, I'm thinking, okay, a hoodie. I wear a hoodie, but as a designer, you're looking at just the hood and how it could be used in other, as you said, apparel.
Yep.
So I guess I guess is that how you're trained? And that what made you think of that, or does that just come natural to you and you take that different product and you make different things out of it? So we're expanding our
Yeah, that's
growth, we're
interesting.
expanding our sales with the same solution, just putting in different, um, in this case, different garments. But you can take that same thing, take what you got, and figure out how to use it in different ways. Is that kind of what
Yeah.
we're talking about?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, I'm trying to think if it was something that I was trained. It's an interesting balance, because I think in fashion design school, they want you to be super different. Like, they want your designs to be like not shoppable in a store, like super creative. So it was a fine balance there, learning to then be in the real world. But I think there was that idea of when they taught us how to curate what they call a collection of clothing, and we'd have it walk down the
Mm,
runway. You want all of it to be different, but all go together. So you'd pull like certain elements that carried over to a different garment, like something that was in a top is now in a dress. So I think that level of thinking helped apply to this.
mhm,
But I think it was one of those moments as kind of becoming a business owner and looking, as we talked about, like the price and what's the most efficient way to do this, and the best way to manufacture this with our manufacturers and not have to reteach them, is, yeah, just taking that element and being like, hey, this hood is great. And the cheapest, fastest way to do that is turn it into a vest, which is what the same, the hoodie, but without the sleeves, essentially. Like, there's some other
yeah,
design
those
changes,
were
but
like you said
very
that earlier, I was
simply, you
like,
take out the sleeve.
"Wow, that's never really thought about that," but because I think of a
Yeah.
hoodie, I only wear one hoodie, but a vest or a hoodie or even, I'm gonna show my age. Back in the day, Pacific, Ocean Pacific, I'm not sure they don't exist anymore, but they had T-shirts with hoodies, long sleeve T-shirts
Yes.
with hoodies. And, it technically was a hoodie, but it was you could get creative all types of ways with all you got coats and jackets and
Yeah. Like,
just
it
keep
can
on
apply to
going.
so many things. And now your website looks super full. You look like you've designed 100 different things, but it was those really simple tweaks out to your manufacturer. And so it makes it a lot more efficient and just a lot faster and easier for you as a, especially solo business owners. And I know probably people listening thinking about starting a business, it'll start with just you. So as easy as you can make your processes, but like diversify your offerings that easily, definitely pretty nice.
Okay, now you then thought up another question for me. The, talking about the internet and your Facebook and your website. Do you ever and I'm not sure how the clothing business works, and I don't know if I really want to. But in this case, I do have a question of: do you actually produce something on in the computer and pre-sell it before you actually go ahead and manufacture it?
Yeah, so we do some pre-orders. Usually they still make a sample, so I'll take photos and they just see some photos
Mhm.
online,
Okay.
and then there'll be a delay before it ships. But we don't sell any like strictly digital products, I guess, besides a gift card that you can then apply to a later order.
Besides doing a test, are they doing the test to make sure it's feasible to produce, or are
Like
they
they're
doing
the
it for
gift
you to
card?
look at? No, 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 for
Oh, the sample.
your sample. Are they doing that
Yes.
to make sure it's feasible to produce, or are they just doing it so you have something to show someone?
It's a little bit of both. It's to make sure it's feasible to produce. Um, I like it so that I can take the photos and show people, try it on with customers, and make sure it's something that actually works. The
Mm,
other reason they do a lot of samples is to make sure essentially it's done right. They're kind of teaching themselves what it should look like. So you send a manufacturer more or less like what like a draft of a building would be, like kind of the floor plan of what the garment is. You send that to a factory, they make it. And then when the sample, like you send back critiques, you'll be like, oh, the sleeve was actually too short. Refer back to our floor plan dimensions, essentially.
I hear you.
And
It's,
yeah,
it sounds very
it's
similar
very
to.
similar.
So you have an architect in our world, and the architect
Yep.
is the designer, kind of like you.
Yep.
But then we got to give it to an engineer, and the
Yep.
engineer is the one who's got to make that design work.
Yes.
Then that engineer gives us a plan, the end user, not the end user, but the person contracted it, and they got to decide, well, that looks great on paper, but that's not feasible in real life. And
Right.
so if everybody works together, things are a lot better versus
Yes. So it's
make this
exactly like
happen.
that. So it'd be like if you were able to build a sample house first to make sure
Yeah.
the plans from the engineer worked. And then you're like, hey, actually, that wall is falling down. We got to fix that. That plan did not work in the plan.
Yeah.
So in the apparel industry, it's just easier to kind of have those, just have them make it, look at it made, and then kind of change the plan from there. But yes, very similar. My sister and brother-in-law are structural engineers. And so we joke all the time that my tech packs for factories are the same as their drafts and floor plans that they
It
make.
is just a different
Yeah.
game. So
Yeah, exactly.
if we know someone or would like to get something for a gift, for example, or a donation, where would we get your items? Search for
Yes, you
them.
can buy them all right on our website, which is sensoryclothes.com. It's also shopsensationalyou.com. That's the brand, Sensational You. But sensoryclothes.com is easier to remember if you're listening to the podcast. And all my contact information is also always there. And I answer the chat on the website. And we're on all social media as sensational_you. So definitely reach out if you have any questions or need help picking out a gift.
Julie, I sure appreciate that. And it's a great thing what you're doing, no doubt. And hopefully you're making money at the same time. That's the idea for everybody is to
Yeah.
win-win for both sides. And if you guys in the show notes want to find some stuff for Julia, her information will be in our show notes below. If you want to talk about vision, passion, solving a problem, anything like that, get a hold of me, hardhattheceo.com. And there's a link there for a free breakthrough session. Julia, thank you for your time today. It's been a wonderful chat.
Yeah.
I've
Thanks so
just
much for
been
having
truly
me.
impressed, and I hope everybody was inspired today to help others. Talk to you later.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you all next week. Bye bye.